Stress. We have to live with it, don't we? In this world, we're going to have stress. So it's just, as long as you're living 21st century, you're facing stress. In Canada, the stresses we face are somewhat different than some other places in the world. If we go into what we used to call the third world or the developing world, you might have stress just trying to find clean drinking water, something to drink. You might have stress just being able to afford food, since food's been going up so dramatically all over the world, the price of food. Wheat has gone up something like 50% in the price in the grain markets, which is having a tremendous knock-on effect in a lot of places where people are starting to wonder how they're going to eat. We don't have that problem. Not many of us here in this particular room look like we're undernourished. Most of us, we have something to eat. We might have to shift off of something to shift to something else, but most of us have food. Stress. Well, if you're living in certain countries of the world, you don't know what your government's up to, and if you have any problems, you really can't go to them for help because they're really not interested in you. They're interested in, maybe the only thing that they might be interested in is what they can get out of you. Stress in this world in the 21st century, it is a lot. What is it? You know, concepts such as anxiety, antagonism, exhaustion, frustration, distress, despair, overwork, premenstrual tension. It's one I don't have. Overfocusing, confusion, mourning, fear. All these come together in sort of a general broadening into the meaning of what is stress. You know, varieties of stress come into our lives. Usually we think of stress coming into our lives because of something negative that happens to us, something that's bad that's occurred to us in our life. But you know, there are also positive sources of stress, and actually it has its own name. And when something good, something very good happens to you, you sometimes have what you call eustress. That's the opposite. That's when good things happen to you and you still have stress. I mean, people who get married sometimes have a certain amount of eustress. And they wonder why they might have some reactions to this, that, and the other. You get some great things happen. Yeah, it is still stress. Whatever the source, stress can have clearly a serious physical impact on our body. Stress activates, of course, what does it do? There's an immediate effect. It activates the sympathetic nervous system and release of stress hormones, including, well, we all know adrenaline, but also something like epinephrine and cortisol. And that's all, you know, these are the things that come when we are stressed. There is a biological, physical, chemical change that occurs in our bodies when we're put under stress. These things do happen. Any sort of strong outside stimuli, something that happens to us, can activate what is called the stress syndrome, or maybe a general adaptation syndrome. The impact generally manifests itself as what? If you're under stress, how do you know you feel stress? Well, I probably don't need to tell most of you. Most of you know this already. And maybe if you watch a lot of television, you'll see it even in the commercials. Headache, muscle tension, even acne for you younger guys. Gets a lot of stress, you'll get acne. Face will break out. Compromised immune system, anxiety, depression. Yeah. Stress can make you feel depressed. Anger, aggression, boredom, nervousness, withdrawal, nightmares, and a whole variety of physical illnesses. Basically, just about every illness in the book of the Medical Association can be linked in one way or another to stress. So what are the major stresses in life? You know, probably none of this is surprise to any of you, but what are the major stressors in your life? How about financial problems? That happens to be the #1 source of stress these days here in North America, not being able to do what you want to for lack of money. Debts are piling up, credit card payments, pending mortgage installments. Maybe you're behind. Maybe you're 3 months behind. Maybe you're 6 months behind, and you're wondering what's next. There are whole varieties of people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are undergoing this situation right now in the United States. Rising costs of education, mounting expenditure on health concerns. Yeah, financial problems are a major source of stress in our life, because we have these expectations that we have built in our lives, and if we don't meet them, it adds just a lot of stress. It's difficult. There's also workplace stress, worried about your next promotion, facing negative or bullying behavior by your boss, not reaching your well-deserved career goals, or office politics, major changes that is taking place in the organization. It's being bought, they're going to lay off everybody. This happens thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Prospect of losing your job. Yeah, the job figures are down. Yeah, it might become more of a big serious problem in Canada if actually the US dollar does finally tank. It will tank, which is going to be one of the most remarkable things that's happened in my lifetime, when the US dollar tanks. And of course, even though I'm living in Canada and am a Canadian citizen at this point, because I was naturalized, what is it now, so 6 years ago, what happens in the United States is going to affect us. Because Canada is the mouse sleeping on the bed with the elephant. And if we have a couple million people that are almost swarming across our borders because it's so desperate down in the United States and we're not selling anything to the United States, do you think this is going to stress us? Probably many of you young people in this room, and unfortunately maybe even myself, are going to see something like this happen. We are in store for major changes in North America. When the US dollar collapses, we are going to see a dramatic amount of stress in our lives. Every single one of us. How about stress in personal relationships? All right. Does that affect anybody in here? Anybody have stress in personal relationships? Caring for children, attitude of relatives, friends, arguments with spouse, children, friends, parents, change of place due to requirements of your job. Yeah, you get moved to someplace new because you have to. Illness of a family member. We've heard something about this. Moving in with parents, or moving out of older children, or more likely these days, moving in of older children. They were saying that 1/4 of the children of, 20 to 35 have moved back home with the parents within the last so many months, because frankly, people can't afford to do otherwise now, especially in the United States. Things have changed. We have had a sea shift in where we are in North America. And we're going to all be touched one way or another. Are you ready for increased stress in your life? Are you ready for it? Do you know how to deal with it? You have to think about it. So you have also there are the health problems, chronic conditions, heart disease, diabetes, fibromyalgia, cancer. All these things, they stress. Stress precipitates or aggravates. They say it's something like between 75 and 85% of all health problems, heart disease and tension. All these things are aggravated even by the stress, so it gets worse. Your personal concerns. That's the fifth source of stress. Lack of control. Tops the list of many personal concerns, inner conflicts, doubt, uncertainty, fear, loneliness, lack of spiritual insight. I don't have a clue where we're going, you know. Personal concerns are a major source of stress, just like health, just like conflicts. Death. Death is a major source of stress. Death of a spouse, a child, a parent, any other loved one or close friend. Death adds a major stress to one's life. I know that. I've had death of a variety of people, death in my own home. It's difficult to live with someone who's approaching dying. It's difficult to see family members die one after another. I've had the experience within this last decade of seeing 4 of my family members die up close and personal. It's difficult. I've seen death of parents completely alter how a child lives, so they really just lose it, completely go off the deep end. They couldn't deal with the stress. What does the Bible say about stress? Probably it is one of the most important topics of our life in the modern world, but it's going to become even a greater source of interest in the coming years because we are going to be greatly stressed, brethren. And everyone on the internet, you are going to be greatly stressed. You are going to be pushed to the limit by the events that are coming down the road. That are going to affect you, they're going to affect me. How are we going to deal with this stress? As a term, if you look up the word stress in your concordance, many of the older translations won't have it there. I mean, it's not a specific word. Some of the more modern translations, you will actually find it used a few times. But the word stress for the ancient Hebrews really isn't biblical. They didn't have a real concept. They didn't really put it that way, the way that we do. And the concept was a little different. While they didn't have that exact word like we have now, the experience, however, is biblical. The experience of stress in the Bible is really there. How people dealt with it or didn't deal with it very well is also in the Scriptures. You know, and from the biblical perspective, some say, well, I'll pray. I'll pray no stress. I don't know how that's possible. I got a newsletter from somebody who's in Asia this week talking about what's happening here in North America. And, you know, all of Asia knows that the United States dollar is doomed, by the way. This isn't news. All of Asia knows the United States dollar is doomed. They're buying gold like nobody's business because they're getting ready for the collapse. We're sitting here fat, dumb, and happy, and the Asians are saying they're going very shortly. And this newsletter that I was reading, and the fellow who's writing it is an American, although he's living in Asia, he's very concerned. See, how do we prepare for stress? He's encouraging his readers to develop more self-reliance because, you know, if the money's no good, you're not going to be able to buy anything, or if the inflation goes up like bananas, and because the money's no good, what are you going to eat? He's encouraging his people, he's encouraging what he's doing and the community he's living in there to be more self-reliant. He's also encouraging his people to pray. To pray. In the Bible, the absence of stress is considered in many cases, you know, a graver symptom than its presence. The Bible would say if there is no stress in your life, look out, because something is wrong. According to the Word of God, in this present world, the godly life was never meant to be easy. The godly life was never meant to be easy. Let's go to Amos in 6:1. Amos, the prophet Amos, chapter 6 and verse 1. Amos is making this point. He's making the point that the people who mostly do not have stress are the ungodly, because they're stressing everybody else. They're having a great time taking and oppressing everybody else. Everybody else is feeling stressed, but they're doing just fine. And I'm going to be reading the New Living Translation because I like the idiom. It's more accessible to the modern reader and listener. So I'll be reading mostly out of the New Living Translation. So Amos 6 and verse 1. What sorrow awaits you who lounge in luxury in Jerusalem and who feel secure in Samaria? See, if you've got $1 billion or $1 million in your Cayman bank account that you've ripped off because you've got all your bonuses from selling your credit default swaps and all this stuff, and the government's bailed out and you've got your hands in the pot, and with the drug dealers or all these other people, they've got money. They're lounging in luxury in the chief places. You are famous and popular. Yeah, all of our movie stars and things like this. Verse 3, you push away every thought of coming disaster, but your actions only bring the day of judgment closer. Our nation has been pushing away God. When the Supreme Court in California voids Proposition 8, which was voted in by a majority of California voters saying marriage was between a man and a woman only, and they void it, step on all of the people of California to say, no, you can't do that. Homosexual marriage is fine. We're going to allow it. They, by their actions, they're bringing the day of judgment closer. But then they don't believe God exists. And they don't believe the Bible has any standing in a modern court of law. They have no vision of the past, of what founded our nations and our civilization. Verse 4, how terrible for you who sprawl on ivory beds and lounge on your couches, eating the meat of tender lambs from the flock and of choice calves fattened in the stall. You sing trivial songs to the sound of the harp and fancy yourselves to be great musicians like David. Of course, this is putting it in the old-fashioned language. Just imagine how you would put it, you know, the music and all the stuff and the fancy restaurants and rack of lamb and all this sort of stuff of we're the wealthy. And you go to these top-class restaurants, New York and every big city place, they don't put the prices on the menu, If you have to worry about the prices, you shouldn't be there. You're not in that class of people. They don't worry about stuff like this. They're having a great time. You drink wine by the bowlful. Perfume yourselves with fragrant lotions. You care nothing about the ruin of your nation. Yeah, the ungodly are just moving along. They're living for today. They're having a great time. Their money buys them whatever they need. They don't feel stressed. The wicked, the evil, the ungodly. Sometimes that's a problem to us. Because we'll look at these people and say, why aren't I there? Why am I? And we can envy these people. Let's go to Psalm 73. Psalm 73. The psalmist right here. Because sometimes, you can see that prosperity of the ungodly and they don't have any pain. They don't seem to have any stress. Boy, that's the life for me. No conscience, no pain. Psalm 73, verse 1. Again, the New Living, I'm reading from the translation. Truly God is good to Israel, to those whose hearts are pure. So he's putting here the saying that God is good to Israel. He's good to his people, his covenant people. We are his covenant people. He's good to you, to those whose hearts are pure. But as for me, the psalmist writes, I almost lost my footing. My feet were slipping and I was almost gone. He started worrying about stuff. He started looking around to him. He started finding his thoughts drifting off at a different place. For I envied the proud when I saw them prosper despite their wickedness. Yeah, there's not just this quid pro quo. We don't have this immediate, you do something bad, you get a bad result. You do something good, you get a good result. We don't see that happening very much in our society. Because this is not a society and a social system that is organized, directed, and run by God. It is done by his adversary. And so, of course, you don't have those things. They seem to lived such painless lives, verse 4. Their bodies are so healthy and strong. They're beautiful people. They don't have troubles like other people. They're not plagued with problems like everyone else. They wear pride like a jeweled necklace and clothe themselves with cruelty. Yeah, there's so many TV shows just like this. You see the proud. These fat cats have everything their hearts could ever wish for. They scoff and speak only evil. In their pride, they seek to crush others. They boast against the very heavens, and their words strut across the earth. There are a lot of people who are completely mocking the God of the Bible, mocking the words of God. It's all over it's full, our media, the people who are doing this. And so the people are dismayed and confused, drinking in all their words. Yeah, your average excuse me, Joe, your average Joe in the street is drinking in these words of people like, you know, Dawkins and others, all the atheists who are publishing great books and going on great book tours and filling halls. Yeah, they're making their points. Media is full of it. They want to print it. What does God know, they ask. Does the Most High even know what's happening? Of course, they don't even think God exists. Look at these people, verse 12. Look at these wicked people enjoying a life of ease while their riches multiply. Did I keep my heart pure for nothing? Did I keep myself innocent for no reason? I get nothing but trouble all day long. Every morning brings me pain. Is he feeling stressed? Is the psalmist feeling stressed? If I had really spoken this way to others, I would have been a traitor to your people. So I tried to understand why the wicked prosper. But what a difficult task it is. Then I went into your sanctuary, O God, and I finally understood the destiny of the wicked. Truly, you put them on a slippery path and send them sliding over the cliff to destruction. In an instant, they are destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. When you arise, O Lord, you will laugh at their silly ideas as a person laughs at dreams in the morning. Then I realized that my heart was bitter, and I was all torn up inside. I was so foolish and ignorant. I must have seemed like a senseless animal to you, yet I still belong to you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, leading me to a glorious destiny. The people of God have a glorious destiny. Anything we go through in this life is worth the glorious destiny being born in spirit to the family of God, to be called his son or his daughter. What can compare with that, if anything this world has to offer? Verse 25, whom have I in heaven but you? I desire you more than anything on earth. My health may fail and my spirit may grow weak, and inevitably it will. For each and every one of us, there will come a day when our health will fail, and that human spirit within us will start to faint away. But God remains the strength of my heart. He is mine forever. Those who desert him will perish, for you destroy those who abandon you. It's a sober warning to each and every one of us. But as for me, how good it is to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord, and he is. Sovereign means he decides. He's in control. He leads and guides. He changes your life overnight. If he decides to do so, go with it. Do not lose faith. I have made the sovereign Lord my shelter. See, if you're a captive and sent out on exile and you're sleeping under the stars and you don't know what you're going to drink the next day or eat that day or wherever you're going to go, how do you live with that? But if you've made the sovereign Lord your shelter, your source of strength, then you can endure whatever it might be. You can be hardy because you have that faith. And I will tell everyone, the psalmist says, about the wonderful things you do. Yes, the godly in this life do suffer stress. We do suffer stress. Let's go to Luke 22. I'm going to read this one in the NRSV. Luke 22. Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, and we'll go to verse 39. And he, Jesus, came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, pray that you may not come into a time of trial. See, just like this friend of mine, who I personally knew, who's now living in Asia, said, how are you going to deal with what's coming down the pike? He said, pray and strive to be self-sufficient in whatever physical way you can. Then he withdrew from them a stone's throw away. Verse 41, Jesus knelt down and prayed, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me, yet Not my will, but yours be done. Not my will, but yours be done. Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. In his anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Was Jesus stressed? Yeah, he was. He was terribly stressed. He was stressed in a way that very few human beings could be, because he knew what was coming. And he'd seen it and thought about it for how long? Thousands of years. He knew it was coming. He knew the pain of crucifixion. He'd seen it with his own eyes even. He'd witnessed it, of course, many, many, many times, the horrible things that men do to other men. And he was going to submit himself to this. It was a test. And of course, he passed the test. He did not lose faith and courage. He committed himself to his Father and became the Messiah, the Christ, the one who is there to succor us in whatever difficulties and problems that we may have. I want to look at one example of somebody, a human being. Jesus, of course, is a remarkable individual. And most of us can't even remotely start to think of ourselves as, I'm as strong as Jesus. I mean, let's face it. I would, it's hard for me to even think about that in some ways. But one of the books in the Bible which goes through and talks a lot about stress is what? When you think of the Bible, what do you think about? Who are some of the real characters? Well, I suppose we could be here for quite a while. Who really went through stress? And let's add one more element to it. Who went through stress that's in some ways going to be similar to what you and I are going to go through here sometime in the near future. You young guys looking at me, it's going to happen in your lifetime. And probably, unfortunately, it's going to happen while I'm still around kicking. Because I might have the white beard, but I'm in pretty good health, relatively speaking, and I expect to do another 20. If I do another 20 revolutions around the sun, I bet I'm going to see some awful stuff. Awful. That I really am not looking forward to seeing. I have to say that. I sometimes hear people in various churches of God talking about, isn't it interesting, these terrible things that are going to happen. No, it's not interesting. It's scary. It's stressful. And it happens incrementally, and it gets, it's like you're in a bad situation, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse. How are you going to deal with it? There's a book in the Bible of somebody who also lived at a time when a society was falling apart, and there was a real hostility towards the God of the Bible. There's hostility to those who were teaching His Word and speaking His Word. I mean, it was upfront and harsh. And if you're going to be one of God's people, you've got to fortify yourself and think about things in advance now. So we're going to look at this, and maybe you haven't read this particular book of the Bible very much. It's not one of those things we really talk about very much necessarily. But let's go to the book of Jeremiah. He's one of the major prophets. The book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah the book of Jeremiah is a lot about stress. That's one of the major themes in this book for you and I. That's one of the things we can draw out of it. I mean, it wasn't written just for the people back then, 2,500 years ago. It's written for you and me, for a purpose, for a reason. Okay? These things, when we read them, they're written for a reason. Let's go to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, when he got in on this, okay, because there he was, fat, dumb, and happy, growing up, just, ordinary Joe Jeremiah. He's born, young guy. As young as some of you guys sitting here, right here, today. Some of you young guys. He's your age. Wasn't my age. And, when he started to get stressed, he said, I'm too young for this. I'm too inexperienced. Why me? Let's take a look at this. Jeremiah 1, chapter 1 and verse 4. The Lord gave me this message. Jeremiah writes. So pay up and listen. It's not mine. These aren't my words. It's what happened to me. It's what the Lord said. The Lord gave me this message. Now he starts quoting God. Verse 5. Jeremiah, that's chapter 1, and again, this is the New Living Translation. I knew you before I formed you in my mother's womb. Now, that's quite a statement. You think about that and the whole question of abortion. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. Wow. Talk about a destiny. The guy who is marked out by God for a mission. O sovereign Lord, I said, I can't speak for you. I'm too young. The Lord replied, don't say I'm too young. You must go wherever I send you and say whatever I tell you. And don't be afraid of the people, for I will be with you and will protect you. I, the Lord, have spoken. Wow. Then the Lord reached out and touched my mouth and said, look, I have put my words in your mouth. Today I appoint you to stand up against nations and kingdoms. Some you must uproot and tear down, destroy and overthrow. Others you must build up and plant. It's an interesting commission he was given, both the destructive side and the creative, the building side of creativity, because destruction can also be creative as well as building something new is creative. He's going to do both. You hear mostly in this book, we will hear almost exclusively in this book of the destructive side, but that wasn't his only commission. There was another part that's not in this book. And that's a mystery for those who are interested in searching out and understanding mysteries. Verse 11, and the Lord said to me, look, Jeremiah, what do you see? And I replied, I see a branch from an almond tree. And the Lord said, that's right, and it means that I am watching, and I will certainly carry out all my plans. Okay, do you see you're in tune with me? Okay, we've got the frequency cleared, okay? You got a direct path to what I'm sending you? Yeah, he says, I see it. He says, that's good. That's the test pattern. This is almond branch. That's right. You're in tune with me. I'm watching. And I will certainly carry out my plans. Those are two very important things to know about the God we deal with. Then the Lord spoke to me again and asked, what do you see now? Again, as I said, it's like a television signal. You got a clear signal that's coming in, wireless signal or something. And he said, you see what I'm sending you? And I replied, I see a pot of boiling water spilling from the north. Yes, the Lord said, for terror from the north will boil out on the people of this land. Listen, I am calling the armies of the kingdoms of the north to come to Jerusalem. I, the Lord, have spoken. They will set their thrones at the gates of the city. They will attack its walls and all the other towns of Judah. I will pronounce judgment on my people for all their evil, for deserting me and burning incense to other gods. Okay, that's what they did 6th century BC. Of course, we do, in our country, in our lands now, we do have false gods of every sort, but then we also turn our back on God and just deny that he even exists. So yeah, we're very similar to these people. Or we're idolaters in that we substitute everything else in our life, our materialism, instead of the worship of God. Our vanity, our pride. Yeah, that's what we worship. We worship ourselves in this modern era. Yes, they worship idols made with their own hands. Get up and prepare for action. Go out and tell them everything I tell you to say. Do not be afraid of them, or I will make you look foolish in front of them. For see, today I have made you strong, resilient, hardy, like a fortified city that cannot be captured, like an iron pillar or a bronze wall. You will stand against the whole land, the kings, officials, priests, and the people of Judah. And I will fight. They will fight you, but they will fail. For I am with you, and I will take care of you. I, the Lord, have spoken. What a promise. What a stressful commission. It's not going to be easy because God promises these things, but when you're in the room with all these people, they're there and you're by yourself. It's tough. And it was going to be stressful for Jeremiah. He would like to say, I'm too young. I'm too experienced. Who am I? But God told him, hey, don't say you're too young. Don't say any of this stuff. Have faith, trust in me. Pray. Pray. Have faith. Jeremiah sometimes also said, in looking at it and the stress he had, well, he could easily have felt the adversaries are just too stubborn, devious, and hard. These people never quit. Morning, noon, and night. Let's go to Jeremiah 18, verse 18. This is what he was facing, the kind of stress that he had in his life and the kind of people he was having to deal with. Jeremiah 18 and verse 18. Then the people said, come on, let's plot a way to stop Jeremiah. We have plenty of priests and wise men and prophets. Let's figure out something. Let's hatch a plan. Let's lay a trap. We don't need him to teach the word and give us advice and prophecies. Who is this guy? And look at him, young guy. Probably a teen. Let's spread rumors about him and ignore what he says. Verse 19, Lord, hear me, Jeremiah says, and help me. Listen to what my enemies are saying. Should they repay evil for good? Because he was telling them what was coming. He was telling them what they needed to do to save themselves, to save their wives, to save their children. But they didn't want to hear it. They didn't see it. It's turned their backs on God. They have dug a pit to kill me, says Jeremiah, though I pleaded for them and tried to protect them from your anger. See, Jeremiah was concerned about these people. They were his people. They were probably of his own family. They certainly were of his tribe and his kindred. In verse 23, yes, Lord, you know about all their murderous plots against me. And they had all these murderous plots, Jeremiah 18:23. And when did he come to the point? After he'd seen quite a bit of this, he began to see what God had been seeing for some time, and why he was doing what he was going to do. And he finally said, let them die before you. Deal with them in your anger, which is what God was going to do. He had to be tough. He had to look at things from God's perspective. God is merciful, but his mercy has a limit. And when he's had enough, then he punishes. And Jeremiah realized that in spite of everything he had done to try to turn them, to try to help the nation, not to have the disaster fall upon it, they were not interested. In fact, they were trying to kill him all the time, making his life difficult. Now, Jeremiah probably also thought, from time the task is just too big, too hard, and too dangerous. What God was trying to tell him oftentimes, he was trying to tell him, well, you need to do what I'm saying that you do, even though it seems counterintuitive. Sometimes what God asks us to do seems counterintuitive. It seems like, man, it's just going to get me in worse trouble. I've got to do this, because if I don't do this, I've got to whatever. When we rely on our own reasoning and strength, it stresses us. Surrender to God, as your sovereign God. Believe in him. Believe that Jesus cares for you. It might even be counterintuitive. It might seem to be, that's nuts. But that's what God says. Do it! Because it's the way of safety. Because you've trusted, you've taken shelter in God's protection. He's watching. He sees. If he says something and he does something, important to follow it, even if it seems counterintuitive. Let's see in Jeremiah where he actually goes through this particular point. Let's go to Jeremiah 42 and verse 9. Jeremiah 42 and verse 9. Verse 9 says this. He said to them, "You sent me to the Lord, the God of Israel, with your request." And this is his reply. So Jeremiah here is speaking to a little audience. At this point in time, the land has been destroyed. Jerusalem has been conquered. All of the cities of Judah have fallen to the king of Babylon, and he's killed a whole pile of them. Some he's taken as slaves. And then some of the poorest people of the land, he said, take care of the vines, take care of the land, and, everybody else I've killed or whatever. There's no more real problem here for me. I'm, stay in the land and live here. But the people who were left, after all these disasters, that they've seen all these terrible things happen, they were scared. And they came to Jeremiah and said, "What do we do?" Jeremiah said, "You sent me to the Lord, the God of Israel, with your request." And this is his reply. "Stay here in this land. If you do, I will build you up and not tear you down. I will plant you and not uproot you, for I am sorry about all the punishment I have had to bring upon you. Do not fear the king of Babylon anymore," says the Lord. Yeah, there was good reason to fear the king of Babylon. I mean, he'd killed them by the hundreds of thousands. He'd taken them by as slaves. He's a vicious, cruel man, Nebuchadnezzar. You didn't cross him. And they were scared whatever, because they had no power. They knew they couldn't resist him in any sort of way. All their defenses have been destroyed. People have been slaughtered, taken captive. There were only a few of them. "Do not fear the king of Babylon anymore," says the Lord, "for I am with you and will save you and rescue you from his power." That must have been hard. When they had no more real military power of any significance, God's asking them, "Stay here. I'm going to rescue you from his power. I will be merciful to you by making him kind, so he will let you stay here in your land." He's going to change his mind. But then, if you're going to do that, you have to have faith and trust in God to do what is counterintuitive. Verse 13. "But if you refuse to obey the Lord your God, and if you say, 'We will not stay here, instead we will go to Egypt, where we will be free from war, the call to arms, and hunger,'" all this stress in our life, this terrible experience we've been going through for the last few years. Everything has been stripped away, our homes, we're living like vagabonds in the ruins. They were tired, they were stressful. God said, "Trust me. It'll get better. I'll take care of you. I can work with this king of Babylon. I can change his mind so he's not going to be on your case, kill you to a man." But no, they were insisting, "Let's get out of here. Let's go to a place where it's safer and we'll be free from war, the call to arms and hunger," they thought. We'll get to a different place and hear the Lord's message to the remnant of Judah. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, says. "If you are determined to go to Egypt and live there, the very war and famine you fear will catch up to you, and you will die there. That is the fate awaiting every one of you who insists on going to live in Egypt. Yes, you will die from war, famine, and disease. None of you will escape the disaster that I will bring upon you there." Of course, the story is, these people that came to Jeremiah and asked them, they killed the governor that the king of Babylon had put in charge of them, a Jew, Gedaliah. They killed him. They murdered him because he said he's a collaborator. Okay, and then they grabbed Jeremiah, his party, and ran down to Egypt because it says, "We'll be safe there, behind the wall of the Egyptian army." But what happened historically was that after the king of Babylon had digested the Judean Empire, the Judean country, the kingdom of Judea, He then went down into Egypt and wiped it too and took it over. And all these people got slaughtered. They should have stayed where they were. They should have stayed where they were. Now, Jeremiah could have also said to himself, there's no way out. There's no way out. He had this experience. Sometimes there seems to be no way out. You're stuck. You're caught. You're had. But from all physical aspects, that may be so. It may seem you don't have a friend in the world left to you. It may seem that everything is desperate, but if you have God, whatever the situation, if you have that relationship with God and you are faithful and your spirit is pure and you know it, you can have faith. God won't forget you. Don't be stressed out. Don't freak out. Don't let your fear and anguish, don't let it all just, run you, as it were, down to Egypt. Run you off to doing something you shouldn't. So let's take a look at this, where God makes this point. Let's go to Jeremiah 38. Jeremiah chapter 38. I'll start with verse 1. Now Shephatiah, the son of Patton, and Gedaliah, son of Pashur, and Jehukal, the son of Shelemiah, and Pashur, the son of Malchijah, said that Jeremiah heard what Jeremiah had been telling the people. He had been saying, this is what the Lord says, everyone who stays in Jerusalem will die from war, famine, disease, but those who surrender to the Babylonians will live. The reward will be life. They will live. So Jeremiah was saying, hey, go over to the enemy. And while they were surrounded, slip out one of the tunnels. Go, hands up, you'll get your life. Yeah, you won't get anything else. You won't have any of your property, whatever, but you'll get your life. Go ahead, do it. Save your life. Go out to the enemy. And of course, you could imagine with the people who were trying to protect the city, that's treason. Because they wanted to fight. So these officials went to the king and said, this man must die. Jeremiah was in trouble. He had a bunch of powerful people surrounded by an enemy army, and the people inside were saying he's got to die. That kind of talk will undermine the morale of the few fighting men we have left, as well as that of all the people. This man is a traitor. And King Zedekiah agreed. All right, he said, do as you like. I can't stop you. So the officials took Jeremiah from his cell and lowered him by ropes into an empty cistern in the prison yard. It belonged to Malchijah, a member of the royal family. There was no water in the cistern, but there was a thick layer of mud at the bottom, and Jeremiah sank down into it. Things looked pretty bad for the prophet Jeremiah at this point. He's in a place, they've dropped you in a pit, and you're going to die in a couple days. There's no water to drink. There's no food. It's bleak city. Totally stressful. Probably the stress was causing him, he's having to fight against being depressed like nobody's business. But Ebed-Melech, the Ethiopian, an important court official, heard that Jeremiah was in the cistern. At that time, the king was holding court at the Benjamin gate, so Ebed-Melech rushed from the palace to speak with him. My lord the king, he said, these men have done a very evil thing in putting Jeremiah the prophet into the cistern. He will soon die of hunger, for almost all the bread in the city is gone. Verse 10, so the king said to Ebed-Melech, take 30 of my men with you and pull Jeremiah out of the cistern before he dies. God somehow caused this man, a foreigner, an Ethiopian, slave of the king, that's what Ebed-Melech means, slave of the king, to have mercy. He had heard Jeremiah's preaching. He says, what they're doing is wrong. These people, this party that put him in that wanted to kill him, so the king actually took 30 of his own personal guard to accompany Ebed-Melech because he needed some backup here, some serious backup to go and do this. and pulled him out of the cistern. Let's see. So the kings told Ebed-Melech, take 30 of my men with you and pull Jeremiah out of the cistern before he dies. So Ebed-Melech took the men with him and went to a room in the palace beneath the treasury, where he found some old rags and discarded clothing. He carried these to the cistern and lowered them to Jeremiah on a rope. And Ebed-Melech called down to Jeremiah, put these rags under your armpits to protect you from the ropes. Then when Jeremiah was ready, they pulled him out. So Jeremiah was returned to the courtyard of the guard, the palace prison, where he remained. So he was in the king's own little personal prison where he might get a crust of bread, whatever remained. And it's far better than being in the mud. God didn't abandon Jeremiah. He had done what he was asked to do. And he did not abandon him even when everything looked as black as it can be. He turned the heart of somebody to help him, who actually had the nerve and took the risk to go to the king and speak against this party that had him put in prison, who were powerful men. He had that conviction, so that Jeremiah's life was preserved. Jeremiah obviously could have felt many, many times, I'm all alone. But Jeremiah was not alone. God saw to it through this whole ordeal, stressful experience of being God's witness to this nation that had turned its back on God. He gave him Baruch, who was his scribe. He was the one who prepared all the things to write on. He wrote it. You had to, a scribe in those days, you had to prepare the inks, you had to prepare the pens, you had to prepare what you were writing on, all this sort of stuff. And that was his job, and he was good. He was good at what he did. He was a real person, by the way. We have his scrolls, his signets, a whole variety of them. Baruch was a real, this is not made up. We have evidence of these actual people from this time. They're actual seals. This is not a made-up story. This is what really happened to real people. God preserved it. And he's preserved even the archaeological evidence to make the point. Let's go to Jeremiah 45 and verse 1. Of course, Baruch was in the same boat, as you want to put it this way, with Jeremiah. Here he was. He was a professional scribe in the kingdom, which meant that he had a high position of status, and now, everything is falling apart. All his plans, he wanted a nice house, he wanted a nice vineyard, he wanted a nice life, and none of it was coming to pass. He wasn't even sure he was, with the Babylonians all around him and the food almost all gone. I'm sure he thought he was a goner. He was being stressed about it. Here, I've done everything right. I'm shafted. I've had it. Everything's going. Jeremiah 45. Yes, God gave Jeremiah a companion, and he was also going to give, in these verses, assurance, not only to Baruch, that he wasn't going to abandon them, but also to Jeremiah when you think about it. The prophet Jeremiah gave a message to Baruch, the son of Neriah, in the 4th year of the reign of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, after Baruch had written down everything Jeremiah had dictated to him. So he'd written it all down. And while he was writing down, he knew, because he was intimately connected with the palace and all the politics. Just writing it down, that was bad news. Because he was helping this guy who was seen as a traitor. And he said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says to you, Baruch. You have said, I am overwhelmed with trouble. I am stressed out of my gourd. Haven't I had enough pain already? And now the Lord has added more. I am worn out with sighing and can find no rest. Everything is going bad. Everything I see. The worst possible things. Baruch, this is what the Lord says. I will destroy this nation that I built. I will uproot what I planted. Are you seeking great things for yourself? Don't do it. I will bring great disaster upon all these people, but I will give you your life as a reward wherever you go. I, the Lord, have spoken. Wow. If there is one message in this time, really, that we can think about, here he was. He was helping the work of God. He was devoted. He was taking even risk, and everything was going worse from worse to worse. When you're in a time like this, you can't see great things for yourself. It's not what it's about. And you can avoid a tremendous amount of stress by letting things go. There's a time to gather things. There's a time to let everything go. That's counterintuitive in our society, which is a society of acquisition. We like to acquire more and more and more stuff, and that makes us feel secure, it makes us feel good, makes us feel better. But there's some times when we have to be ready. If you're not going to be stressed out and if you're not going to be destroyed, you have to do what's counterintuitive and let it all go. You have to have faith in the God who is unseen, that the guy over there has a gun. But I'm still going to stay faithful to God, and he's not going to put a bullet in me. Have faith, and even if he does, I've got my reward. If you haven't been in situations that are dangerous, you haven't been right at the point of where you realize, I could try to make my way, I could try to do this and try to avoid what I think is a terrible problem, or you do what's counterintuitive and say, no, I'm going to stick with God. You may have that opportunity. You may have that opportunity. Put your faith in God. Trust in the fact that he shelters you, and things will go a lot better. Let's take a look at one last thing. Some people could say it's all lost. Jeremiah probably, and he did not, probably, we're going to look here. It is all lost, Everything, he says it's all lost. There's no hope, there's no future. It's all going down. He could have been depressed by that. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 32 and verse 24. This whole chapter is really good, but for shortage of time, I'm not going to go over it all. But you can see Jeremiah's attitude. Here it was, finally, everything is happening of what he'd been prophesying for years and years and years is coming to pass. I'm not prophesying the U.S. dollar is going to collapse. God hasn't given me a specific revelation on this. But if you want to look at it from the standpoint of Daniel, you can look at, the handwriting is on the wall, and I can read the writing. Can you? Anyways, chapter 32 and verse 24, Jeremiah says this, see how the siege ramps have been built against the city walls. Through war, famine, disease, the city will be handed over to the Babylonians who will conquer it. Everything has happened just as you said, and yet, O sovereign Lord, you have told me, the stage, when he's in the city, to buy the field from one of his relatives. To buy a field from this guy. Here it is, everything is collapsing, and you tell me to give this guy the last money I have, my last 17 pieces of silver, to buy this piece of land that's out there beyond the enemy lines. You're telling me to buy the land? Paying good money for it before these witnesses, even though the city will soon be handed over to the Babylonians and will all be killed or taken slaves. You're telling me to buy this? I think everything's, you've been telling me we're shafted, everything's lost. What are we doing? Verse 26, and the message came to Jeremiah from the Lord, I am the Lord, the God of all the peoples of the world. Is anything too hard for me? Is anything too hard for me? We have to remind ourselves, is anything too hard for God? The answer is and should be, if you're going to avoid stress, you've got to answer that question correctly. Stress that will kill you. Stress that will make you do things you never would have imagined that you could do it. Because when one is fearful, one is anxious, one is all these other things, you do all sorts of strange and weird things. Verse 36. Just jump down to verse 36. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Now I want to say something more about this city. You have been saying it will fall to the king of Babylon through war, famine, disease. Yeah, but you've been telling me this all this time. Jeremiah must have been thinking to himself. You've been telling me all this for a while. But this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Verse 37, I will certainly bring my people back again from all the countries where I will scatter them in my fury. I will bring them back to this very city and let them live in peace and safety. They will be my people, and I will be their God. And I will give them one heart and one purpose, to worship me forever, for their own good, and for the good of all their descendants. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them, and I will never stop doing good for them. I will put a desire in their hearts to worship me, and they will never leave me. It is an amazing thing. In the years to come, if you spend a little time with Jeremiah, now I'm talking about the prophet, and think a little bit about these instances. If we want good, if we want to avoid having the kind of stress that will give us massive headaches and maybe even a stroke and all the other things that are going to be coming to pass in the future, we need to think carefully about what is this example of Jeremiah and the things he went through, how he was not alone. He could face the most hard and devious of people, that God was with him to pull him out of every sort of trial and trouble. As long as he put his faith and trust in God, and he prayed, and he was faithful in that shelter of God, and he didn't try to hold on to stuff he shouldn't have been holding on to. He was willing to do what was counterintuitive, what seemed like by all logical purposes of what you could see with your eyes. No, God says, do this, do it. Don't worry about it. Your life is in his hand. He will take care. Times are coming, brethren, when we're going to have increased stress in our lives. Learn to live with it. Follow the example and live by the example of the prophet Jeremiah.